Hello, welcome to another one of our videos, and today I'm going to be answering a question I'm asked quite a lot, and especially in recent times, and that is relating to having exercises for every single muscle group. There's still the perception that to build strength into areas, say like biceps and triceps or calf muscles, that you need a specific exercise for that muscle to actually make it stronger. And I'm going to show you through a handful of exercises here that it's not important. It's actually more important to build the strength through a movement where you're utilizing multiple muscles at a time. But the most important thing about that is you're building strength relative to their partners. So in the case of this exercise being a deadlift with Kim here, there is so many muscles on the go here that there's so many things that can go wrong from it. So if we break it down, firstly, we'll just take it back a bit. So if we go back just to the beginning of that. So right at that point where she's here now, right? Just for me to list every muscle here in just this one movement, I would need like 5 minutes because there's just so many things going on. But the main movers are the glutes and the hamstrings, all right? They're the prime movers in this lift. They're the ones primarily concerned of getting that bar up off the ground. But what we can't discount is that the grip strength of her hands to being able to hold on to this, which are, most people think it's just the forearm, but it's way more than that. It's the shoulder. The shoulder stabilizer has got to be huge. So she's got to recruit all the muscles in her upper back here, and on top of that, all through her core. Because if there's anything through that gives up through here, she's going to pop out the back here, or maybe lose stability at the shoulder. There's just so many things all being required. Even the glutes and her grip of the ground on the floor through her feet will play a role in her grip strength here and creating an overall kinetic link between the whole body to make that lift effortless and efficient. So the strength is being driven through all of those areas at the one time. They're all on the job there. There's not one muscle not working in that. So why would I need to have a separate exercise for every single one of them to make them stronger? All I need to do is become stronger in that lift. Bearing in mind, I'm going to need to learn other movements because I may be strong at that, but it doesn't guarantee I'll be strong for the push-up, which Kim's going to show here. So the strength in the deadlift will not translate to a strength in a push-up. It's a completely different movement pattern. Disregard the muscles. The muscles, they're definitely important, but it's more the pattern, how the nervous system generates the strength in that movement. So in the case here, the triceps are heavily involved. Everyone knows that the chest muscles, which are at the front there, are obviously going to be the main prime movers, and their sisters are going to be the triceps. But in this movement, you've got all the rotator cuff guys. So there's 4 of those rotator cuff muscles playing a role in centering that shoulder within the socket correctly, so you don't blow a rotator cuff or a shoulder impingement, create neck pain. You've got all the muscles around the scapula here that are working together to create closure. You've got serratus anterior. That's a massive muscle in this exercise. And again, you've got all the abdominal muscles of the core. You've even got some of the hip flexors here in the push-up. So all of those muscles are involved in this one movement. I don't need to have 10 different exercises to make the triceps and that stronger. I just need to become better at the push-up. All right, so that's a completely different movement pattern to the deadlift, completely different set of muscles, and they're all being strengthened. I've become good at the movement pattern, and I can use other movement. I don't have to use a push. I could use a cable press. I could use a dumbbell press. I could have used the deadlift with the single leg. There's many versions, all right? So now we're working into a different movement again, being the wood chop. And in this one, because it's a standing one, again, we've got the legs being involved. Now we've got like a different plane. Now we're working more in the transverse plane, where we're moving laterally, and we've got a rotational movement. So all the other 2 exercises were more sagittal plane based. Now we're moving in a completely different plane. So now, obviously, this exercise is known for the obliques. All right, so that's the main movers here. But to be honest, the legs are hugely involved in this standing position, which is very important for it to be done correctly with the right timing. And I can't disregard out of all of these how important one big factor in all of them is, and that's the brain. All right, without the brain doing what it's supposed to do, all of these exercises go wrong real fast, and usually muscles that are not meant to be doing the work are forced into doing it because you're doing the entire movement incorrectly. Next one we're going to look at, so far we've looked at a bending movement, we've looked at a pushing movement and a twisting movement. Now we're going to look at a pulling movement, and one of the simplest ones is the chin-up. All right, so here's Kim showing us the chin-up. And this comes back to probably the question, do I need to do some specific arm bicep exercises for my biceps? Well, trust me, when you start doing a lot of chin-ups and rowing movements for that matter, it doesn't necessarily have to be a chin-up, it could be any sort of rowing movement. Anytime that her elbow comes into full flexion like that, your bicep had to pull those bones together. There's just no other way you can do it, and vice versa on the push-up when she was pushing away for her elbows to extend, the tricep had to do that. So you can basically think any exercise where I'm flexing my arm, it's my bicep. Any time where I'm straightening my arm, it's my tricep. But again, if we break it down into what muscles are involved, well, the main movers in this one are going to be the lats. All right, but again, we've just mentioned it's the biceps here. In this close group here, the pecs even are heavily involved. There's, again, all the rotator cuff guys, and again, there's the abdominals. The abdominals stop the legs swinging around. So I'm having multiple muscles with multiple joints all on the go at the same time, and they're all actually being used to complete exhaustion. And this one is actually very much determined by the weakness of the shoulder. So the grip is going to give up first to make you let go because it senses danger to the joint here. Right, so there's a reason why you don't use wrist straps as well, right? And the lats are what you don't feel at the time, but they're the ones you feel the following days. So to strengthen your biceps without strengthening the lats relative to how they're working is creating a lot of danger for the shoulder. All right, so we've looked at bending, we've looked at pushing, we've looked at twisting, we've looked at pulling. Now we look at a different one again. And this one's what we call a gait pattern, and this is where the single leg stance comes into it. So gait, otherwise known as walking and running. So it's a different movement pattern from the others. So the strength that I use, so very much like a deadlift, this is very much a single leg deadlift, but because we're going to a single leg stance, it brings in a different element that the other ones, we don't really see it from side on here. When we'll get Kim to demonstrate this from front on, and you'll see her make a mistake in this in a second, but this brings in a different plane, so we bring in the frontal plane, and again, foot stability is now introduced. In the other ones, in the deadlift, not so much. In this one, now very much so. And if there's any problem so now we're seeing problems at the ankle joint and the foot joint, they become a huge factor. The hip joint as well, because now it's got to control this sideways movement. So the foot and the hip are working heavily together to try and stabilize the body to keep this alignment. Anything that's sort of failing here, and she's going to lose the exercise. Again, we'll see the core once again heavily involved here, and there it just goes. So either she lost it through the foot or the hip or through the trunk. Any one of those things could have ruined her stability to do this correctly. All right, so I'm training all of these muscles to their capacity and in the way that they're designed to function. They're not designed for an isolated movement to try and annihilate their muscle fibers as you would for some of the prime movers. All right, so we've looked at the single leg stance, and then now we want to look at the lunge. So with the lunge, Kim's showing us a walking lunge here, so it probably again fall into the gait pattern, but because she's usually using a lunge stance to do so, we will classify this more as a lunge. This one really shows us the ability of good hip mobility. Again, there's the trunk stability. You nearly lost it a bit then. We'll get her to head back, and from side on you'll see how the hip factor becomes a lot more of a big component of this exercise. And once again, the amount of muscles on the job here are incredible. So this is probably where, on that single leg one before, probably should have broken that down into, so I'll pause her here. The main movers in this one again are the glutes and the hamstrings, but because she's upright, we're going to see a lot more quad involvement, and even on that back leg. This one, we probably start to see all the little muscles, the adductors, like your groin muscles, and all the hip adductors. A huge amount of involvement of the core again, but we'll also see a role of the calves here, even the shin muscles around the ankle and all the foot stabilizers. So all these guys are all heavily used because there's a toe-off phase. So when she has to move to the next step, she has to use all those muscles to be able to generate that toe-off and propulsion. Otherwise she can't move. So if I move right back into that, go back. So when she's coming from this point here into that, where that back foot's moving right there, we need to have all of those little muscles around the ankle and the foot there on the job, or otherwise she can't do the movement. So as much as you're feeling the quads, hamstrings and glutes, all those other smaller muscles are heavily involved. Now if we had something in our arms, we would be able to generate some movement, some muscles in the upper body at the same time. All right. This is just to give you an idea of the fact that you don't need to have individual muscles used in other exercises. You just need to become good at movement patterns. You could have more than one of these. It's not necessarily saying you only need one deadlift or one lunge, one squat. You could use more than one. It just depends on how much you're trying to do and what the intention of your workout is and if it's relevant to your needs. But my point here is there's bigger benefits to be made from working with big integrated movements. There's a difference between compound and integrated. Compound could be a bench press as a compound movement because it has more than one joint, but it's not integrated. And it's not integrated because the legs are not required. And once it's integrated and it's linked with the upper body and the lower body, it's a far more effective exercise for how you're meant to move and how you really generate strength. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's giving you a bit of clarity on whether or not you need to have an exercise for every muscle. And the only time I probably would use specific exercise for muscles if in rehabilitation from injury, where I'm trying to restore weakness to a specific area that's been damaged or affected, and we need to regress the movement because the big movements like this are too difficult. But once those big movements are restored, it's always about trying to improve them as best as you can, and the best way is through those exercises themselves. All right, and that's how you become really strong. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Check the description on the video for links to articles with more information, and you'll and that should help you out with what you need. All right, and we'll see you on our next one.